begin with a chapter on health and hygiene. To begin with, what is health? Health is, in simple forms, absence of illness. It could be physical illness, mental illness. So a good health characterizes no sickness, no physical inability, no mental disorder, no social problems, no anxiety, no tension. So that's a very simple definition for health. Now, this word hygiene is derived from a Greek word, and this word is Hygeia, that means goddess of health. So the word hygiene is derived from a Greek word Hygeia, which means goddess of health. The term hygiene has three dimensions. First, talks about a balanced diet. Balanced diet means a diet which incorporates carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals in a well-defined way. The next is it talks about personal hygiene, and the third important thing is it talks about the public sanitation and public facilities, the public hygiene we can say. So those three are the key elements of the element of hygiene. Now, when we talk about health, we also need to understand about disease. We have classified what is health. So what is disease? Disease is malfunctioning which is present in the body. Now this malfunctioning could be of any of the body organs including the brain. So even the mental disorders would be categorized under a form of disease. When we are talking about disease today, we would be focusing on 5 different ways under which we can classify disease. One is based on spread. It could be endemic, which is located into specific areas. For example, goiter in the regions of sub-Himalaya, yellow fever in the areas of Central Africa. Epidemic, that is spreads across for a larger area. Plague in Surat that happened in 1994 is a good example. Pandemic is a disease that has incorporated the people across the globe. AIDS, HIV, COVID-19 are examples for it. Sporadic are those which are scattered. For example, malaria in a specific region, cholera in a specific colony is an example of scattered diseases. Then based on communicability, we can classify the disease as communicable versus non-communicable. Based on pathogen, we can say the disease could be of bacterial origin. Bacterial origin disease could be tuberculosis, cholera, tetanus, typhoid. Viral diseases could be mumps, polio, rabies. Protozoan diseases could be malaria, amoebic dysentery. Helminthic diseases include filariasis, ascariasis, which is because of tapeworm and roundworm. The next is based on transmission. The disease could be airborne, waterborne or vector-borne. Those which are transmitted through air, those which are transmitted through water, or those which are transmitted through vector. Vector-borne, a common example is female Anopheles, which transmits malaria. The next is based on origin. Based on origin, the disease can be classified as congenital or acquired. Congenital means by birth. The diseases which are genetic, for example, sickle cell anemia, hemophilia are example of congenital diseases. Those which are acquired, that means they can be communicable or non-communicable. Communicable could also be called as contagious or infectious. For example, cold, viral fever, coughing, sneezing are all communicable acquired diseases. However, on the other hand, there could be non-communicable acquired diseases. Non-communicable acquired diseases could be classified as degenerative disease. These diseases could be because of the degeneration of kidneys, lungs. There could be nutritional deficiency diseases which could be due to deficiency of certain nutrients. Allergies are again another example of non-communicable acquired diseases. Then we do have genetic diseases and mental diseases which are part of non-communicable acquired diseases. So this was a quick classification. Now, how do they transmit? They can transmit directly or indirectly. Indirectly means, as I said, they could be vector-borne, Anopheles for malaria, housefly for cholera. Vehicle-borne, where we have cholera, typhoid, AIDS, it could be bacterial or viral in nature. Airborne, which is typhus. Unclean hands and fingers, because of which ascariasis, that is through roundworm the diseases is spread. Fomite-borne, which is through touching the contaminated articles like kitchen utensils or any other personal belongings. This includes hepatitis A, diphtheria. So these are by indirect transmission. Direct transmission could be through droplet. A good example for droplet is viral, cough, cold, sneezing, coughing. Direct contact the person whom you are taking care for. So chickenpox, measles. The next is contact with the soil. Tetanus is a classic example. So if you are playing, you fall down, you are asked to have tetanus vaccination. The next is through animal or insect bite. Rabies. Then we also have malaria as examples of direct transmission through animal or insects. Then is by placenta from mother to the child. German measles, syphilis, AIDS are some example. Now, how do the viruses or bacteria enter into the body? There could be multiple entry points. Sometimes, let's say the skin is cracked or broken. There are blisters. So, all those are signals which could indicate the entry of the germs. It could be through mouth. It could be through air. It could be through the different means that we have discussed. Now, the mode of transmission, when we are studying that science is called as epidemiology. So epidemiology is the science to study the transmission of various diseases. The period during which the symptoms are not revealed is called as incubation period. So let's say you get exposed to a person suffering from cough and cold, then it's not that you would develop it instantaneously. There is an incubation period. It could be few hours, few days, and then that symptom could show. So this is called as the period of incubation. The next is how do you prevent a disease? Prevention is what is known as prophylaxis. So usually we hear this term with quinine. So quinine is a medicine which is administered for malaria as prophylactic medicine as well, in case of preventing malaria from happening. So prophylaxis is preventive in nature. Prophylactic measures specifically for some of the diseases like cholera, typhoid, jaundice, the communicable diseases like sneezing, coughing, viral. Some of the common prophylactic measures include maintaining personal health and hygiene, having access to safe, clean drinking water, destroying the vector if it is a vector-borne, proper immunization, and following a proper vaccination chart. Now we would understand three important diseases from each category: vector-borne, viral-borne, bacterial-borne, and so on. To begin with, vector-borne. Now vector-borne, three important ones: through housefly, mosquito, and cockroaches. Through cockroaches in the kitchen, bakery, storeroom, hotels, cockroaches spread the disease. They are omnivorous, so they eat on vegetables, they eat on spoiled food as well. They destroy the clothing, the leather things as well. How they are controlled? They are controlled by taking care of the leftover food and spraying malathion. Malathion is one of the insecticides which is used to prevent spread of cockroach. Also BHC in 2% concentration. Fumigation of the building with hydrogen cyanide is one of the ways through which prevention of cockroach can take place. The next is mosquitoes. Now for mosquitoes, female Anopheles is one such example. Similarly, we have Culex for filaria. There is Aedes for yellow fever and dengue. Aedes which leads to dengue and yellow fever, both of them are viral in nature. Anopheles for malaria through plasmodium. So plasmodium is a protozoa. And then Culex for filariasis through Wucheria, which is a nematode. So the three are different here for mosquitoes, very important. Prevention of mosquitoes, having mosquito net, spraying of flint and bacon sprays, eliminating the breeding sites for mosquitoes, fumigation of the house with sulfur dioxide, biological control by fishes, the common fishes, Gambusia fish, which controls or which kills the larva of the mosquito. The next is housefly. Houseflies are seen on cut open food, on feces and filth. Some of the common diseases spread through houseflies include cholera, typhoid, diarrhea, dysentery. Now, how do they spread? They have their body which is hairy and the legs pick the germ. Sometimes their mouth part, the end of it is bulbous in nature. So, they touch on the food through the saliva of the housefly, through the excretion of the housefly, and sometimes infection through the infected person's eyes to another eyes, and that is called as trachoma. cholera, that is again spread through houseflies. So flies also lay egg in the nasal passage of an individual who is sleeping. The larvae hatch and enter into the brain, where they cause a problem, and then sometimes the eggs can also deposit in the sore eyes, and they can even lead to blindness. So control of housefly, elimination of housefly is very, very important. Having the netting for prevention of houseflies to enter is one such ways. Keeping the doors and windows closed, eliminating the breeding spots, and keeping the surroundings clean are some of the ways through which houseflies could be prevented. The next is bacterial diseases. 3 bacterial diseases that we would talk about is cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis. Cholera is a communicable disease usually seen in crowded places when there are fairs or there are functions. Undercooked food, raw food are some of the ways through which cholera spreads. Again, flies are a common way through which spread of cholera takes place. Some of the symptoms of cholera include watery diarrhea, nausea without vomiting, muscle cramps, sunken eyes. Sunken eyes is a classic characteristics. So suggested way is boiled water, chlorinated water that must be consumed, and incubation is 6 hours to around 2 to 3 days, in which the disease could occur, the symptoms could occur. The next is typhoid. Typhoid is an enteric fever which is caused by Salmonella typhi. Cholera is caused by Vibrio cholerae. So Salmonella typhi causes typhoid. Now typhoid is again through contaminated food and water. Incubation is 1 to 3 weeks. So the incubation period is high for typhoid. The fever is very high for the first and the second week, and then less for the third and the fourth week. It takes around a month to recover. Extreme weakness, acute headache, constipation, enlarged liver and spleen are some of the symptoms. Vidal test is one of the ways through which identification of typhoid takes place. So the test is important, Vidal test. The prevention again includes maintaining proper personal hygiene, health, proper sanitation, chlorinated water, preventing any consumption of uncooked and raw food. The next is tuberculosis. So tuberculosis was discovered by Robert Koch in 1880. It is caused by rod-shaped bacteria, which is Mycobacterium tuberculi, and these release the toxins which are known as tuberculin. So tuberculin is the toxin which is released. Now incubation is around 2 to 10 weeks, much higher than the typhoid. So the least incubation period is for cholera, followed by typhoid, followed by tuberculosis. Now to control tuberculosis, the vaccination which is given is BCG vaccine, very, very successful vaccine. Now what are the symptoms of tuberculosis? Symptoms of tuberculosis includes weight loss, chronic sputum. That sputum is one of the ways through which the test for tuberculosis is done. Another classic symptom is mild fever in the afternoon, sweating in the night. So how can you avoid tuberculosis? Avoiding dark areas, avoiding polluted areas, providing individual with proper rest, well ventilated areas are some of the ways through which tuberculosis can be controlled or prevented, right? The treatment includes use of multi-spectrum antibiotics because one antibiotic won't work. The common areas where tuberculosis affect is lungs and limbs. However, tuberculosis of bone also is seen. So tuberculosis can affect any organ of the body, but specifically most common ones are the lungs and the lymph. Now government has released a program which is National Tuberculosis Control Program. So these are some of the ways through which bacterial diseases are caused. The ways to avoid those include avoiding the spoiled food, stale food, having washing properly the hands, having access to clean drinking water supply, and also vaccination where and whenever possible. Penicillin was the first antibiotic which was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1929, and this was an antibiotic which was widely used during that time, and later on the antibiotic classification became as broad spectrum and narrow spectrum. Broad indicate that it could be used for multiple diseases. The narrow spectrum indicates that it could be used for specific diseases. Coming on to the next one is viral diseases. 3 viral diseases that we would talk: HIV, chickenpox, and hepatitis. Hepatitis could be viral borne, which could be classified as hepatitis A, B, C, D, and E. It could be also autoimmune in nature. Now, how is hepatitis caused? It could be due to intake of alcohol, drugs, or toxins because of extreme consumption of medicines. Contaminated food water is also responsible for it. The classic symptoms include pale yellow stool, destruction of liver cells, yellowing of eyes and skin. So those are classic symptoms to identify signals or symptoms for hepatitis. To test this, liver function test is done, abdominal ultrasound is done, and viral antibody testing is done. To take care, avoid consumption of raw food, avoid consumption of seafood, avoid sharing of used needles, infected syringes at hospitals. So those are some of the ways through which it could be prevented. The next is chickenpox. Chickenpox is again contagious, commonly seen under the age of 12, but also seen after age of 12. It is caused by varicella zoster. The vaccination is available, but once the person gets infected, it can last up to 5 to 10 days. So initially blisters are created. These blisters are filled with fluid, and then there are scabs. So scabs are then shed down. It is actually highly serious for babies. So vaccination is extremely important to prevent spread of chickenpox. As we said, how does it happen? It happens through the skin. So broken blisters on the skin are the way through which chickenpox can enter. The incubation period is around 10 to 21 days. The next is HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS. AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and this syndrome was identified in 1981. The agent responsible for it, which is HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, was identified in 1984. Since then, there have been various measures, but this has been declared as pandemic disease, which has been found across the globe. Now, what happens is HIV is around 120 millimeters to 90 millimeters in diameter. Now what happens is there are two identical copies of the RNA. RNA is enclosed in a nucleocapsid of the protein, and then there is an enzyme which is reverse transcriptase, which is associated with this virus, and then this actually affects the T cells. So once T cells are affected, the immunity gets down, and therefore any infection could be caught very fast by a person suffering from HIV/AIDS. So far globally, nearly 3 to 3.5 million people are affected by AIDS, of which nearly 1.5 million are seen only in United States. India has nearly 42 different surveillance centers to check the AIDS and the population of AIDS transmitted through blood transfusion, transmitted through sexual contact, from mother to child, contaminated needles, contaminated syringes. So very, very important to use HIV negative blood in case of blood transfusion. Use only disposable syringes, mass education, and maintaining a good relationship. Then what are the centers which study viral diseases? In India, it is NIV, which is National Institute of Virology, Pune. Center for Advanced Research of Virology, again in Pune, All India Medical Institute in Delhi, and National Institute for Communicable Diseases in New Delhi. Four of the very important centers which are working with controlling the spread of AIDS in India. The next is protozoan-borne diseases. Three important diseases that we would understand here again: malaria, amoebic dysentery, and sleeping sickness. Malaria, as we had discussed most of it when we talked about mosquitoes as the vector. This malaria has four different species. It is caused by Plasmodium. So Plasmodium vivax, falciparum, Plasmodium malarial, and Plasmodium ovale. So four species of Plasmodium which cause malaria. It is introduced in the blood by female Anopheles, which is the mosquito, and the carrier. The incubation period could be several days. Some of the common symptoms include headache, nausea, steep fever high up to 106 degrees Celsius, and then sudden sweating. This reoccurs after 48 hours. Now, prevention includes use of quinine, mesapirin, polidrine as some of the medicines. SPF 66 vaccine is a genetically engineered vaccine which is effective in 60 to 70% cases. Application of mosquito repellents, taking care of mosquitoes, avoiding or preventing the breeding of mosquitoes, use of fish gambusia to control the larva of mosquitoes are some of the ways to control it. Amoebic dysentery is a disease of alimentary canal. It is caused by Shigella and it is commonly seen in children. Blood in a stool is a common symptom. It affects the ileum and the colon. Uncooked food, unhygiene on the food, flies on the food are common ways through which amoebic dysentery can be caused. So cooked food actually destroys the cyst of Entamoeba histolytica, which causes amoebic dysentery. So cooked food is a suggested prevention and remedy for avoiding most of the bacterial, viral as well as the protozoan diseases. The next is for amoebic dysentery specifically, soaking the raw vegetables in potassium permanganate and then using it is one of the ways through which we can avoid the cases of amoebic dysentery. Antibiotics also work well here. Antibiotics like tetramycin, aureomycin and fumagillin are some of the antibiotics which are given for amoebic dysentery. The next is sleeping sickness caused by testis fly. Now, testis fly causes African trypanosomiasis, which is called as sleeping sickness. Nearly 37 countries in South and Central Africa are affected by it. So, the insect bites onto the skin and then the incubation period is around 3 weeks. Fever, headache, affecting the lymph and the lymph nodes are common symptoms of sleeping sickness. Eradication of testis fly, taking all the preventive measures for mosquito and flies as we have suggested are some of the ways. Using insect repellent is another way. The next is the last section that we will discuss under helminthic diseases. Under helminthic diseases, we talk about 3 important diseases: Escherichia, Tiniasis and Filariasis. Escherichia caused by roundworm, Tiniasis caused by tapeworm, Filariasis causing the elephant foot or elephantiasis. Now, Escherichia is the disease of large intestine by roundworm. As we previously mentioned, the 2 diseases, it was Titaniasis which was mentioned. So, Titaniasis is by tapeworm, Filariasis is by elephantiasis. Okay, Escherichia is by roundworm. It is a disease of large intestine. Titaniasis is again by tapeworm, is by tapeworm, but again a disease of large intestine. A brief difference between the two. So let's understand one by one. So Escherichia caused by roundworms is seen in children and it is ingested through the food. Nearly 500 to 5,000 adult roundworms could be seen in one host, and then this is again transmitted through infected food, water, raw vegetables which is consumed. Indigestion, abdominal pain, gastric ulcer, vomiting, diarrhea are some of the symptoms. So again, preventing uncooked food, preventing use of uncooked food is one of the ways. Using vermifuges for removing the adult worms from large intestine is commonly done. Titaniasis is a disease of intestine caused by tapeworm. Here the tapeworm attaches to the intestine. So scolex is the part that attaches to the intestine, and through the scolex, which is the mouth of the tapeworm, it sucks the content and then it hangs in the intestine of an individual. So it is extremely difficult because it causes abdominal pain, weight loss, anemia, indigestion, nervous discomfort as well. The body which is hanging is another important part, and that is a case where titaniasis actually has to be detected and anti-helminthic drugs must be administered to avoid this situation. So tapeworm and roundworm, the symptoms are very, very close by. However, the mode in which they act onto the body are very different. Tapeworm attach themselves through the mouth, which is the scolex, to the intestine and absorb the food and the raw material from the intestine, affecting the individual. Filariasis is also known as elephantiasis. It is called by filarial worm. This filarial worm is creamish, whitish in nature, and it completes the life cycle in two hosts. Man is the primary host and the intermediate host is the mosquito, Aedes or Culex. Now, it comes onto the surface, and then the worms are called as microphyllae. These microphyllae are deep seated in the blood vessel, but during the night time they move on to the superficial veins of the blood. So they are onto the surface, and that time they actually are sucked by the mosquitoes and transmitted from one person to another. This is a way through which they deposit it onto the skin of others. Now it causes destruction of the lymph vessel, it causes fever, swelling of foot, arm. We call it elephant foot because it is swelling of the foot, swelling of the uvula or the scrotum as well. The way is to control mosquitoes, the breeding site of the mosquitoes. The complete control and eradication has been important. So under that we have the National Filarial Control Program by the government, and we have identified the various pockets where filariasis has been endemic. So checking those and preventing its further spread is extremely important. So those were some of the diseases that we have discussed for today. In case you have any doubts or questions, feel free to post those in the comment section. Thanks for joining in. Have a wonderful day.